let's dive right in. When is a country truly sovereign, truly independent? Well, a recent deal over Russian oil, involving the US and India, has put that very question front and center. It's a really complex story about sanctions, energy security, and what it actually means to be in charge of your own destiny in the 21st century.
And wow, did this move from the US trigger a backlash in India. It was immediate and it was fierce. This quote right here from Member of Parliament Manish Tiwari, it just perfectly sums up the mood. Calling the American language neo-imperial wasn't just some political jab, it really touched a raw nerve about India's history and its modern place in the world.
And just like that, this question was suddenly everywhere. It was all over the headlines, it dominated political talk shows, it sparked this huge national conversation about India's role in a world of superpowers. So what on earth was going on? Why would the US do something that would so obviously provoke a major strategic partner?
Well, the answer isn't in Washington, and it's not in New Delhi either. To get to the bottom of this, we've actually got to travel thousands of miles away, to a geopolitical flashpoint that was just about to explode. Yeah, our whole story kicks off right here in the Persian Gulf, at a tiny little waterway that has a massive, outsized impact on the entire global economy.
20%. Just let that sink in for a second. 20% of the entire world's oil supply sails through this one single narrow strait, the Strait of Hormuz. If this thing closes, the lights could, quite literally, start to go out all over the world.
And in early 2026, things got really tense. This whole region became a tinderbox. After strikes killed its supreme leader, Iran retaliated hard, and it all culminated in a full-on blockade of the strait. This wasn't just some warning shot. This was Iran putting a literal chokehold on the world's energy.
And this right here, this shows you why this was a massive, code-red emergency for India. The country is hugely dependent on energy imports. We're talking 85% of its crude oil. And with about half of that oil, plus half of its natural gas coming right through that now blocked strait, you can see how that's not just some distant problem. It's an immediate economic nightmare.
So, with the world's markets freaking out and a key partner in a really tight spot, Washington rolls out a pretty surprising and very specific short-term fix.
Here's how the US Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, sold it. He basically framed it as this practical move to fight back against Iran, to keep the oil markets from going haywire, and to help out an essential partner that was in a jam. So what did this fix actually do? Well, it was incredibly specific, almost like a surgical operation. It was a temporary 30-day pass, and it only applied to Russian oil that was already on a ship before the blockade started. The rules were super strict too. You had to get it to an Indian port by April 4th. Basically, they targeted only the oil that was already floating out there, stranded at sea.
But, and this is a big but, here's the catch. This was not just a friendly favor. The announcement came with some serious strings attached. There was this full anticipation, and that's a direct quote, that after this 30-day window closed, India would start buying a lot more US oil.
Okay, so as you can probably guess, this whole announcement made some major waves, both in the political world in India and, of course, across the global energy markets. And the two sides could not have seen it more differently. I mean, it's night and day. In India, the opposition was calling it a national humiliation, saying it compromised their sovereignty. Meanwhile, the US was portraying it as just a practical, stabilizing move between partners. But the markets, they saw it in much simpler terms. Phew, relief. You can see right here how prices had been spiking, up over 15% in just a week. And then, boom, the waiver hits, and you see that immediate drop in both Brent and WTI crude. The markets breathed a collective sigh of relief.
And for the actual refiners on the ground in India, this wasn't just a number on a screen. This was real. They were in a tough spot, with low stockpiles forcing them to suspend exports and even shut down processing units. So when that waiver came through, they moved fast, snapping up around 20 million barrels of crude they desperately needed.
But you know, this whole 30-day waiver thing, it's just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. To really get what's going on here, we need to zoom out a bit and look at the incredibly powerful and often controversial tool the US is using to play this high-stakes geopolitical game.
And the main tool in this whole game is something called secondary sanctions. Let me break that down. It's kind of clever in a way. Instead of just punishing Russia directly, the US goes to Russia's business partners, like India, and essentially says, hey, if you keep doing business with them, we're going to cut you off from doing business with us.
It's all about using the massive US market as leverage.
And this diagram shows you exactly how that works. It's a power move. The US doesn't have to put direct sanctions on India. The threat is way more subtle, but it's just as powerful. It's the risk that Indian companies could lose access to the entire US financial system, all for dealing with a sanctioned country like Russia.
And look, this isn't some new tactic. There's a history here, a real pattern. The US had already hit India with punitive tariffs for buying Russian oil before, and then they removed them when a trade deal was on the table. So this waiver, yeah, it was a help, but it came with this unspoken threat that those painful tariffs could always come back.
So through all of this back and forth, what has India been saying? Well, their official line has been super consistent. As Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri put it, India's energy policy is driven by one thing and one thing only, its own national interest, and making sure it has a secure, diverse supply of energy.
And that brings us right back to where we started, to that big question. This whole saga over a few shiploads of oil, it actually pulled back the curtain on a fundamental tension in our modern world. In a global economy where powerful countries can basically weaponize their financial systems, what does sovereignty even mean anymore? For nations like India, navigating this new world means constantly walking this tightrope between what's best for them and the immense pressures from global superpowers.